Trump's new space transportation policy could open federal land for heavy-lift spaceports, directly expanding the sites available for Starship and Falcon operations. This is SpaceX Daily, Episode 77. The order directs federal agencies to identify sites on federal land suitable for heavy and super heavy launch capability. It responds to projected growth in launch demand that exceeds current pad capacity at existing ranges. The policy also calls for streamlined environmental reviews that could shorten the timeline from site selection to first launch. Reports suggest the changes target both commercial and national security missions. Existing ranges at Vandenberg and Cape Canaveral would gain redundancy from any new federal site approved under the directive. The administration states that existing ranges cannot accommodate the expected surge in heavy lift missions. Officials noted the need for at least one additional site rated for super heavy vehicles. SpaceX has already demonstrated rapid reuse on Falcon vehicles and is scaling Starship flight tests, both of which benefit from additional orbital class pads. Meanwhile, SpaceX posted roles focused on procuring and trading natural gas to meet power generation requirements at its Texas facilities. Starbase and the planned Giga Bay expansions rely on on-site generation for test stands and production lines. Natural gas supply directly affects the ability to run multiple Raptor test cells and Starship static fire campaigns in parallel. The hiring indicates SpaceX is internalizing fuel procurement rather than relying solely on third-party suppliers. On-site generation capacity must scale with the number of simultaneous engine tests and vehicle stacking operations. Local officials at Cape Canaveral are evaluating infrastructure, noise, and environmental effects ahead of potential Starship operations from the Florida coast. The study examines road closures, public safety zones, and compatibility with existing Falcon and Atlas launches. Starship's larger propellant load and higher thrust profile create different ground impact footprints than current vehicles. Findings will inform whether new exclusion zones or mitigation measures are required. The assessment also reviews compatibility with ongoing Dragon crew and cargo rotations at the same range. SpaceX adjusted the test objectives for the upcoming integrated flight test, reducing the number of new hardware demonstrations. The change follows data review from the prior flight and focuses remaining risk on the booster catch hardware. Ship and booster vehicles remain in flow at Starbase, with the next static fire campaign still scheduled before flight. The revised manifest keeps the program on track for an orbital attempt before year-end. Booster recovery hardware and ship re-entry systems continue parallel qualification testing. NASA contracted SpaceX for $843 million to develop the U.S. deorbit vehicle. The contract covers design and production of a vehicle to safely deorbit the 945,000-pound International Space Station after crew departure. SpaceX will adapt Dragon-derived systems to control the station's re-entry corridor and limit debris footprint. The award adds a new high-mass, controlled re-entry mission to the company's manifest. Work will run in parallel with ongoing Crew Dragon and cargo rotations. The vehicle must manage the station's mass and attitude during the final deorbit burn sequence. Nvidia joined Starcloud's $250 million orbital data center funding round. The round values the orbital compute startup at $2.3 billion post-money. Starcloud plans to place GPU clusters in low Earth orbit and use laser links for data return. Nvidia's participation signals hardware-level interest in space-based inference nodes that could later integrate with Starlink constellations. The funding supports prototype satellite builds and ground segment testing. Laser crosslinks would enable tasking and results delivery through existing Starlink ground stations. Observers on r/SpaceX Lounge are examining close-up imagery of Starship 40's engine bay, noting differences in corrosion resistance between two stainless steel alloys used on the skirt and thrust structure. Separate threads analyze manufacturing sequences for the smallest Starship components, including how laser-cut and formed parts feed into the main tank assembly line. Users are also debating the fuel margin required for a controlled deorbit burn from a 300-kilometer circular orbit, comparing ISP assumptions for Raptor variants against estimated vehicle mass at end of mission. Worth keeping an eye on. Bernstein analysts argue that SpaceX Mobile faces fundamental physics limits on spectrum reuse and latency that could cap its addressable market even if regulatory approvals are granted. The report highlights path loss differences between terrestrial 5G and satellite direct-to-cell links, noting that building density and foliage remain significant barriers. SpaceX has not yet released measured throughput or coverage maps from the initial direct-to-cell tests. Resolution would require flight data showing consistent service in non-line-of-sight conditions. On the AI front, Nvidia's participation in Starcloud's latest round ties GPU supply directly to orbital node development, with the $250 million raise earmarked for prototype satellites that would use laser crosslinks for data movement. The valuation at $2.3 billion reflects expectations that on-orbit inference clusters could later leverage Starlink's existing ground network for tasking and results delivery. Separately, Grokbot has been added to additional X.AI subscription tiers, expanding access to the model family inside the Cursor editor environment for developers already using the AI coding tool. The update broadens distribution of Grok capabilities without requiring separate accounts. The engineering reality behind SpaceX's material choices is that consistent use of 304L-derived stainless across Starship brackets, fittings, and tanks reduces the number of material transitions that must be qualified for cryogenic and re-entry environments. By keeping the alloy family consistent, the company avoids separate heat treatment and passivation protocols that would otherwise multiply inspection steps on the production line. The raw material cost floor for these parts is dominated by the price of nickel and chromium, plus the energy required to roll and anneal sheet stock. Once formed, the finished brackets cost several times that baseline because each still requires precision laser cutting, forming dies, and weld prep machining. That idiot index gap shrinks when the same forming tools and weld schedules are reused across thousands of identical brackets per vehicle. The approach also simplifies the heat shield attachment interface because tile studs and brackets share the same coefficient of thermal expansion as the tank wall, reducing differential expansion loads during ascent heating and descent plasma exposure. Watching how quickly these small part processes scale inside the gigabay will indicate whether the overall vehicle production rate can match the targeted flight cadence. Consistent alloy selection further supports rapid iteration on bracket geometry without introducing new qualification campaigns for each design tweak. A quick look at the tape shows SPCX closing higher. Before we go, the next Starship static fire campaign remains the clearest near-term marker for whether the revised test objectives still support a year-end orbital flight. That covers everything worth knowing about SpaceX today. SPCX is trading at $136.97, up 2.8%. A quick rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify goes a long way. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you tomorrow. This show comes to you from the NERA network. If you want another sharp daily briefing, Offshore North has you covered. Offshore ocean racing explained every Monday with a Canadian angle. All our shows are free at neranetwork.com. New to the network? neranetwork.com Start Here picks the right daily briefing for you in about 2 minutes. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.